Kellan Knox yanked his 6-year-old daughter out of the path of two drunk men shoving each other outside the diner, his voice sharp. "Watch it. There's a kid here." One of the guys, red-faced and stumbling, shoved the other into a metal trash can, then turned to Kellan. "Mind your business, pal." "I am," Kellan said, stepping in front of his daughter. "My business is keeping her safe. You want to fight? Do it somewhere else." The taller man scoffed, but the other backed down, muttering curses as they stumbled off in opposite directions. Kellan exhaled hard, his fingers still gripping little Freya's shoulder. "You okay, bug?" he asked, crouching to look her in the eye. Freya nodded, then pointed behind him. "Daddy, the lady's crying." Kellan turned around and saw her. She'd been standing just beyond the fight. Long dark hair, a white blouse now smeared with street grime, and heels that didn't belong on cracked sidewalk. Her lips trembled, eyes wide. "Hey," Kellan said gently. "You all right?" She blinked as if she hadn't realized anyone was watching, then nodded too quickly. Yes, I'm fine, thank you." For stepping in. "You looked like you were about to get caught in the middle of those two idiots," he said. "Did they hurt you?" "No, She stopped. Her voice was soft but unsure. "I didn't expect that. I was just trying to get to my car." Freya tugged on Kellan's hand. "She looks like a princess." The woman gave a shaky laugh. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me today." Kellan stood and offered his hand. "I'm Kellan. This is Freya. You okay to drive?" She hesitated before taking his hand. "Kiera Calloway, and—" "I think I need a minute." He glanced around. "You want to come in the diner? We were just getting pancakes." Kiera opened her mouth, surprised. "You don't even know me." "You don't know me either, but I'm guessing you could use a warm booth and a cup of coffee," Kellan said. "Come on." "It's not fancy, but the pancakes are decent." Something about him made her nod. Maybe it was the way he'd put himself between her and danger without a second thought. Or maybe it was the way his daughter clung to his hand like he was her whole world. Inside, the warmth of the diner hit her like a blanket. Kellan led them to a booth in the back, and Freya immediately slid in and grabbed a crayon from the little tin on the table. "You don't have to stay," Kiera said, unsure why she was still standing. "I'm not leaving you alone after that," Kellan said, flagging down the waitress. "Sit, eat, breathe." She sat. Kiera watched as he ordered 3 plates of pancakes without asking her, then added, "And hot chocolate with extra whipped cream for the lady." "I don't usually do this," Kiera said quietly. "Get attacked by drunk guys, sit down with strangers." "Well," he said, leaning back, "maybe you need to break that rule every once in a while." She smiled, despite herself. Freya leaned across the table, eyes wide. "You really look like a princess. Are you famous?" Kiera laughed. "No, sweetheart, I'm just a regular person." That was a lie. Kiera Calloway was a millionaire, the youngest partner at a Manhattan real estate firm. She owned a penthouse she barely slept in, a sports car she didn't know how to drive, and a closet full of clothes she wore once and forgot about. But right now, in this booth with sticky syrup bottles and a man who didn't know her last name, she felt more like herself than she had in months. "So," Kellan said as the food arrived, "you from around here?" She hesitated. "Not exactly. I was visiting a friend." "Got lost trying to find the parking garage." He raised a brow. "You don't seem like the kind of woman who gets lost." "I'm not," she said. "But tonight's been different." Freya pointed at her pancake. "You want some of mine? It has chocolate chips." Kiera leaned in. "That's very generous, but I think your daddy ordered enough for me to explode." Kellan chuckled, and something about that sound made Kiera's chest tighten. They ate. They talked. Kiera found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. Kellan was kind, funny, and grounded in a way that made her feel safe. He talked about his job fixing HVAC units, about how raising Freya alone after her mom left was the hardest and best thing he'd ever done. He didn't ask what she did for work. Didn't pry. She realized he hadn't even asked her last name again. After they finished, Kellan walked her to a sleek black car parked 2 blocks away. She fumbled with her keys, suddenly unsure. "Thank you," she said, turning to face him. "No need to thank me," he said. "Just glad you're okay. I mean it. You didn't have to help, or invite me in, or be—" She trailed off. "Be what?" "Good," she said simply. Kellan scratched the back of his neck. "I'm not always good, but I try." She looked at him for a long second. "Can I see you again?" He blinked. "You want to?" "I do." He glanced at her car, her heels, the subtle shimmer of her earrings. Are you sure we live in the same world? I'm not sure about a lot of things anymore, she said, but I know tonight meant something. He nodded. All right. Then yeah. I'd like that. Freya stuck her head out from behind his leg. You can come to the park with us. Kiera crouched down. I'd love that. As Kellan and Freya walked off, Kiera got into her car and sat behind the wheel for a moment, her heart pounding. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she'd made her first million at 28. He didn't know she could buy this street if she wanted to, and he didn't care. Kiera smiled. She hadn't expected to be falling in love tonight, but somehow it had already started. The sun filtered through the tall maple trees as Kellan adjusted the strap of Freya's backpack and handed her the purple lunchbox she insisted on carrying herself. Her curls bounced as she skipped ahead toward the preschool gate, humming something from a cartoon he didn't recognize. Don't forget snack time is before nap time, she called over her shoulder. I won't, Kellan said, stifling a laugh. You make sure Miss Judy actually lets you rest this time. I'll try, she said with a dramatic sigh, then dashed inside. As the door shut behind her, the quiet settled around him, just for a moment. Then his phone buzzed, unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hi, it's Kiera. Her voice was warm but uncertain. I hope it's okay I called. Yeah, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't expect to hear from you this early. I couldn't stop thinking about last night. I know it was unusual, but I liked it. You and Freya, the whole thing. He leaned against the railing. Most people don't call a guy after eating pancakes in a booth with cracked vinyl. Well, she said, most people are missing out. There was a silence that wasn't awkward, just thoughtful. I'm heading to a meeting in Midtown, she said, but I have a few hours afterward. Are you free? He glanced at the time. I've got a service call near the East River Big Commercial Unit, but I could meet after. Around 3, perfect, she said. There's a bookstore cafe on Lexington and 42nd. I'll be in the back, you'll spot me, he smiled. Yeah, I think that won't be a problem. After the call ended, Kellan stared at the screen for a second longer than he meant to. The bookstore cafe was quiet when he arrived. He wiped his hands on his jeans, still smelling faintly of coolant and metal, then pushed the door open. Inside, the scent of roasted espresso beans and old paper filled the space. She was there. Not in the back, like she said, but near a window, flipping through a hardcover with her glasses slipping down her nose. The glasses surprised him. They made her look younger, or maybe just less guarded. You moved, he said as he approached. I like the light better here, she replied, setting the book down. Plus, I figured you'd find me faster near the front. You figured right. She stood and motioned to the seat across from her. Want anything? Coffee? Tea? Something stronger, he glanced at the wall of books and smiled. Just you and a chair's good. She didn't blush, but her eyes softened. So, she said, leaning forward, tell me something about you I don't know. He raised an eyebrow. That's a pretty open-ended request. I like open-ended, she said, and I don't do small talk well. All right, he said. I played piano as a kid, took lessons for 7 years. Her eyes widened. Seriously? Yeah, my mother was obsessed with Chopin. She said if I could get through all 24 preludes, I'd understand life better. Did you? I got through 13 before we had to sell the piano. The air shifted, not heavier, just realer. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be, he said. It taught me how to fix things. I started taking apart the broken keys. After that, it was radios, fans, anything I could get my hands on. She studied him like she was seeing something new. Do you ever miss it, the piano, music? He looked past her out the window. Every day, she was quiet for a beat. If I had known how to play anything, it would have been the cello. Why the cello? It has this ache to it, she said. Like it knows something you don't. He nodded slowly. You talk like someone who's felt that ache. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug. I think most people have. Some just hide it better. He didn't press. Whatever she wasn't saying, he knew better than to dig without invitation. Instead, he asked, what about you? What's something I don't know? She hesitated only a moment. I hate elevators. He tilted his head. You hate elevators. They make me feel boxed in, like I can't breathe. I take the stairs whenever I can. How many floors? I've climbed 22 before, she said. In heels, he laughed. That's commitment. It's madness, she said. But it's mine. A server came by, dropping a slice of lemon tart between them. Kiera pushed it toward him. "Try it," she said. "It's the best in the city." He took a bite and his eyebrows lifted. "Okay, you weren't kidding." "I never kid about dessert." They sat there, finishing the tart, letting the conversation deepen without ever getting heavy. He told her about the time Freya had tried to sell handmade bookmarks at the park and ended up trading them for pine cones. She told him about a weekend she'd spent in Tuscany where she'd learned to make pasta from a woman who didn't speak a word of English. "You've lived 1,000 lives," he said. She looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. "And most of them felt like someone else's." The words settled between them. "I don't know what this is," she said finally, "but I want to see where it goes." Kellan leaned in, his voice low. "So do I." Her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, then sighed. "I have to go. I'm late for something I care about significantly less than this." He stood when she did, instinct more than politeness. As they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun caught in her hair, and he wondered how this woman, this stranger who felt familiar, had walked into his life so suddenly and made it feel different. "I'll call you," she said. "Next time I'll bring the piano." She laughed. "And I'll bring the stairs." They parted on the corner, and as she walked away, he didn't look back. He didn't have to, because something had started and it felt like it wasn't going anywhere but forward. Kellan adjusted the cuff of the one button-down shirt he owned that didn't have a grease stain on it, glancing down at the tucked-in hem with a grimace. It didn't fit like it used to. He'd worn it once to a wedding years back, when things were different, when the future still had a little shine to it. He looked up at the mirror, raked a hand through his hair, and decided that was the best he was going to do. "Daddy, you look like a manager," Freya announced from the doorway, one arm around her stuffed rabbit, the other holding a slice of apple. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "A good thing," she said solemnly, "but you forgot your nice socks." "I don't have any nice socks. I'll draw some stars on them with my markers." He crouched down and kissed her forehead. "You're the best stylist I've got." He stepped into the living room where his neighbor, Mrs. Lyle, was already waiting on the couch, knitting needles clicking softly. "She's already had lunch," she said without looking up. "I'll make sure she gets her spelling practice in before dinner." "Thanks again," Kellan said, grabbing his keys. "I'll be back before 8. "Take your time," she said. "You don't bring women around, so I know this one's different." He paused at the door. "It's not like that, Mrs. Lyle looked up then, a knowing glint in her eye. Maybe not yet. Kiera had invited him to something called the Glasswell Foundation Gala, and he'd nearly said no, but her voice had been careful when she asked, like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. "I want you there," she'd said. "Not because I need a date, because I want to see what it feels like to bring someone who doesn't care about the guest list." Now, as he stood outside the towering entrance of the Belmont Hotel, he felt like he'd wandered into someone else's story. The doorman gave him a once-over before stepping aside wordlessly, and the moment he walked in, the chandelier light hit him like stage lighting. Kiera was waiting near the marble staircase, her dress cut elegantly, but not extravagantly. She didn't look like she was trying to impress anyone. She looked like she belonged, and somehow, like she didn't want to. When she saw him, her face changed, not into something brighter but something softer. "I was starting to think you wouldn't show." "I almost didn't," he admitted. "But then I remembered how you bribed me with lemon tart." She laughed quietly and stepped closer. "You clean up better than I imagined. Don't let the shirt fool you. The sleeves are hiding a burn mark from a busted heat exchanger." Her hand brushed his arm lightly. "I like the burn mark better." They entered the ballroom as a string quartet played something delicate and forgettable. Kiera was immediately intercepted by a man with silver hair and a thin smile who addressed her like they were mid-conversation. "Your proposal for the Eastgate property brilliant," he said. "The board's already drafting approval." "Thank you, Charles," she said smoothly. "We can talk more after dinner." He nodded and drifted off. Kellan leaned toward her. "You didn't mention you were the kind of person people call brilliant in formal wear." She tilted her head. "You didn't ask." They found their table, and Kellan tried not to fidget with the heavy silverware. The woman on his left introduced herself as a hedge fund manager and launched into a story about sailing in Monaco. Kiera turned slightly toward him, her voice low. "You okay? Just trying to remember which fork is for the salad." She smiled without laughing. It's the outer one. A few courses later, the room dimmed and a spotlight shone on the stage. A man in a tuxedo took the mic and began talking about the foundation's work, housing projects, scholarships, community outreach. Tonight, he said, we're proud to honor one of our youngest and most impactful contributors. Her leadership has funded 3 housing developments in the last year alone. Please welcome Kiera Calloway. Kellan blinked. Wait, what? She stood, her expression unreadable, and walked to the stage. The applause was thunderous. Kellan sat there, stunned, as she accepted the award and spoke about investing in dignity, not just real estate. She didn't mention profits. She didn't mention strategy. She talked about the single mother who'd finally had a place to raise her kids without fear of eviction. About the retired veteran who cried when he got his keys. When she returned to the table, she didn't meet his eyes. You didn't tell me any of that, he said quietly. I didn't want to change. This, she said, you and me, I was afraid if I told you everything, it would feel different. He looked at her, really looked. I'm not afraid of what you've done, Kiera. I'm afraid you thought I wouldn't understand it. Most people don't, she said, her voice tight. They see the money, the headlines, and they make assumptions. I don't care about the headlines. I know, she whispered. That's why I brought you. They didn't finish dessert. She excused them early and led him through a service hallway, out a back exit where the night was quieter. They walked without speaking for a block until he stopped. Why are you doing this? He asked. Doing what? Letting me this version of me into your world. She turned to face him. Because I'm tired of pretending that world means anything without people who make it real. He stepped closer. You're not afraid of how different our lives are. I'm afraid of what happens if I keep surrounding myself with people who only see price tags. For a moment, the city noise faded. Her eyes searched his face, not for approval, but for something she couldn't name. I don't know if this works, he said, but I know I want to see. She reached for his hand. Then let's stop talking about it. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but the way their fingers intertwined felt louder than anything he could have said. Whatever this was, it had moved beyond chance. And neither of them wanted to walk away. The rain had started just as the train pulled out of Grand Central, tapping lightly against the windows of the Metro North car. Kiera sat with her coat draped across her lap, watching drops race each other down the glass. Across from her, Kellan held a folded flyer in one hand, his gaze fixed on the tracks ahead like he could will time to slow down. Neither of them had said much since boarding. But it wasn't silence born of distance, it was something else. A quiet charged with everything they hadn't said yet. You sure she'll be okay with Mrs. Lyle overnight? Kiera asked, finally breaking the stillness. Kellan looked over. She'll be thrilled. Lyle lets her stay up and watch old black and white movies. It's basically a vacation. Kiera hesitated, then nodded. I didn't want to pull you away from her. You didn't, he said. I wanted to come. She looked down at the flyer in his hand. You know, I've been going to this benefit every year for 5 years. But this is the first time I've ever felt like I'm not just showing up for optics. He leaned back in the seat. What are we walking into exactly? An estate auction, she said, her tone shifting. The property belonged to a family who lost everything in a trust dispute. I'm bidding on it because the neighborhood's been fighting to turn it into a community center. The city won't fund it, but I can, he blinked. You're buying a mansion to give it away, she met his eyes. I'm investing in something that lasts longer than a view. He studied her for a beat. You ever do anything just for you? She didn't answer immediately. I used to think I was. The clothes, the car, the penthouse, but none of it made me feel like this does. Like walking into a room knowing someone's there who doesn't want anything from me. The train slowed, and the announcement crackled overhead. They stood, stepping out onto the platform into the misting rain. The auction house was a short drive, and the car that picked them up was quiet, sleek, and understated just like her. Inside the estate, the grand hall had been stripped of its warmth. No paintings, no furniture, just a few dozen people in tailored coats and sharp watches, murmuring over wine. Kellan kept close to her side, his hands in his pockets. She greeted a few people, nodded at others, but didn't linger. You don't like these people, he said quietly. They like what I represent, she replied. Not who I am. A bell chimed and the auctioneer took the podium. The crowd gathered, murmurs fading. Kiera didn't flinch as the bidding began. Kellan watched her, not the numbers. Her posture stayed calm, but her fingers curled just slightly around the bidding card. She wasn't buying art or jewelry. She was fighting for something with stakes that couldn't be measured. When the final bid rang out hers, the room broke into polite applause. She didn't smile. She just turned to him, her eyes shining. "It's going to be a youth center," she said, her voice fierce and certain, "with tutoring rooms. And a recording studio, and a kitchen where kids can learn to cook." He nodded once. "Then it's already worth more than any estate here." They left before dessert. Outside, the rain had picked up, but neither of them moved to cover their heads. Kellan stopped at the edge of the drive, glancing at the building behind them. "You've got this whole other life," he said. "And I'm still trying to make rent on a building with a busted boiler." She stepped closer until they were almost touching. "You think I care about that?" "I think it matters to me," he said. "Because I don't want to be someone you help, I want to be someone you choose." She didn't hesitate. "Then let me choose you." "Kiera, I know what I want," she said, her voice trembling now. "And I didn't know it until I saw the way Freya looks at you. The way you hold space for people without asking for anything back. You've given me more honesty in a handful of days than I've had in years." He reached up, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "You scare me," he said. "Why? Because I've been building walls since Freya was born, and you're the first person who made me want to tear them down." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "Then let's knock them down together." The kiss was slow, steady, and certain, not a question, a promise. They returned to the city under a quiet sky, the rain gone, the streets slick with reflections. When they reached his building, Freya was already asleep on the couch, tucked in beneath a quilt, her rabbit nestled beside her. Kiera stood in the doorway, watching them with something like awe. "She's everything," Kellan said softly. "I know," Kiera replied. He turned to her. "You ready for this?" "I wasn't," she said, "but I am now." Weeks passed, then months. The youth center opened that spring, and Kellan was the first to volunteer his time to help repair the plumbing and install the HVAC system. Freya started attending after-school art classes there. Kiera showed up every week, not as a donor, but as a mentor, helping students write college applications and business plans. Their lives didn't blend smoothly, not at first. There were days Kellan struggled with the extravagance of her world, and nights Kiera battled the fear of needing someone for real. But they talked. They listened. They built something stronger than attraction. One evening, as the three of them picnicked in the park, Freya covered in paint from her latest art project, Kellan pulled out a small box. Kiera blinked. "Is that?" "I didn't want to wait," he said. "Not because I'm afraid you'll change your mind. Because I know you won't." She opened the box slowly. Inside was a ring, simple and beautiful, nothing flashy. But engraved inside in tiny script were the words, "I choose you too." She looked up, eyes full. "Yes," she said. Freya clapped, even though no one had asked the question. They married that fall in the courtyard of the youth center, surrounded by children, old friends, and neighbors. No press, no headlines, just them. Kellan didn't stop working. Kiera didn't stop building, but now they did it together. And somehow, in a city that never slowed down, they made space for a life that did. The scent of cinnamon and warm butter drifted through the open windows, carried by the late morning breeze. Kellan adjusted the waffle iron on the counter with one hand, while balancing Freya's art project in the other, a paper crown she insisted he wear for royal breakfast Saturday. The kitchen was humming with soft jazz, and the old radio on the shelf crackled every now and then like it was trying to keep pace. Kiera padded barefoot across the tiled floor, a robe knotted at her waist, her hair still damp from the shower. She leaned against the doorway, watching the scene unfold with quiet amusement. "You're burning the edges," she said, lifting a mug of coffee to her lips. Kellan glanced down at the iron. "Freya said it tastes better that way." Freya, seated at the table in oversized pajamas covered in cats playing violins, nodded with exaggerated seriousness. "It's true, crispy parts are the best." Kiera raised an eyebrow. "Is that right, Your Highness?" "Yes, and Daddy's the royal chef. You're the queen, I'm the boss." Kellan gave her a look. "I thought I was the boss," Freya shrugged. "Not today." Kiera crossed to the table and brushed a crumb from Freya's cheek. Then I guess we all better follow orders. The waffle iron clicked and Kellan lifted the lid. It was a little too golden, but he plated it anyway, added strawberries, and set it in front of Freya with a dramatic bow. Your breakfast, empress of everything. Freya giggled, then dug in. Kiera slid onto the bench beside her, her hand resting easily on Kellan's thigh under the table. It was a quiet touch, but grounding like a shared secret only they understood. Later that afternoon, they drove out toward the Hudson, away from the glass and steel of the city. Kiera had arranged for the three of them to visit a small family-run vineyard perched on a hilltop, not for the wine, but because they hosted outdoor painting classes for kids on Saturdays. Freya sat in the back seat, humming softly, clutching a blank canvas like it was treasure. As they pulled up, a woman in a sun hat waved them toward a path lined with wildflowers. Easels were already set up in the open field, each one facing the valley below. Kellan helped Freya into her smock while Kiera took in the view. I used to come here in college, she said softly. Before everything started moving too fast, I'd sit right there under that oak tree and sketch vineyards like I had time to waste. Time well wasted, Kellan said. She looked at him. You really think so? You're here now, he said. That's what counts. Freya chose an easel near the edge and began slathering blue across the canvas with a paintbrush far too large for the details she was trying to capture. Kellan and Kiera sat on a picnic blanket nearby, watching as the instructor moved among the children, praising clouds and trees that barely resembled either. Kiera leaned back on her elbows. I've been thinking. That's usually dangerous, he teased. She ignored him. About the penthouse. It's beautiful, but it's not home. He looked at her carefully. You want to sell it. I want to live somewhere that has messy mornings and piano music and a fridge covered in glittery magnets. I don't want a skyline view anymore. I want front steps. A real kitchen. A garden Freya can dig up just to replant things. Kellan nodded slowly. We'd need space and something near her new school. I've already started looking, she said. I found a place in Astoria, big porch, light blue shutters. It's nothing fancy, but it felt like us, he smiled. You're serious. I've never been more sure of anything. That evening, after Freya fell asleep in the back seat with her arms around a canvas covered in abstract sunflowers, Kellan pulled the car into the driveway of their building and turned off the engine. They sat in the quiet for a moment, the city buzzing softly in the distance. I never pictured this, he said. This, she asked. Loving someone who lives in a different world and realizing that maybe, just maybe, we get to build our own. Kiera looked at him, her eyes steady. We already are. He leaned in, kissed her gently, then rested his forehead against hers. You still hate elevators, with a passion. Good, he said, because the house has stairs, and a terrible attic we have to fix. Together, I wouldn't want it any other way. 2 months later, they moved into the house on the corner of Sycamore and 18th. The shutters really were blue, and the porch swing creaked just slightly when Kellan pushed it. Freya painted a sign that read, Welcome to the Castle, and hung it by the mailbox. On their first night in the new house, after Freya had fallen asleep with her arms around her rabbit and a nightlight flickering stars across her ceiling, Kiera stepped into the kitchen and found Kellan barefoot, playing a quiet melody on an old upright piano they'd found at a second-hand shop. She leaned against the doorframe. I didn't know you'd started playing again. He didn't stop. I didn't realize I missed it until this place got quiet. She crossed the room and sat beside him. Play something for me, he did. Something soft and slow, unfamiliar but warm. She closed her eyes, letting it wrap around her, and when he finished, she opened them again and whispered, Marry me again. He smiled. Right now, tomorrow, she said, in the backyard. Just us. The next afternoon, under a string of fairy lights and a sky streaked with pink, they stood barefoot in the grass while Freya officiated with a paper crown and a clipboard. Kellan held Kiera's hands, his voice rough with emotion. You gave me a life I didn't know I was allowed to want. She brushed a tear from his cheek. You gave me a love I didn't think I deserved. Freya declared them married again with a dramatic flourish and an over-the-top. You may now kiss the queen, they did. And the kiss felt like a beginning, not a continuation. That night, Kiera curled into Kellan's side in their creaky bed, the window cracked open to let in the summer air. We made it, she whispered. He kissed her temple. We're just getting started, and they were together. Fully, finally, and without hesitation. Because love like theirs didn't need to fit into the world they'd come from, it just needed a place to grow.